Welcome back, friends. Today we will start with lecture 7. Lecture 7 is a continuation of the elements of visual design. As I said, when you decide a product, you should have two things in mind. One is functional aspect, the second thing is aesthetic aspect. So, visual design also plays a very important role. But without visual design, can the product succeed? Not possible. Without functional design, only with a visual design can it succeed? That is also not possible, depending upon applications, but predominantly when you look at a product, it is not so. So, visual design, last time last lecture we discussed about point, line and then shape, freeform shapes. So, now we will continue with that little bit more. Last time we also studied about color, and it is pretty interesting. You can start doing playing with color while going through Microsoft. It gives you a big hexagon pattern, and wherein which all what I discussed, primary color, secondary color, complementary color, all those things are there. You can start playing with it, and I gave you an assignment trying to do a texturing or texting of the name, and then trying to play with different fonts and size and other things. So, let us keep continuing with elements of visual design, and with this lecture we will try to complete element of visual design. So, here we will try to cover the topic balancing, proportions, emphasis, juxtapositioning, rhythm and unity. So, continuing with the principles of visual design, the principles of design represents the most general classes of tools available for determining the ideal arrangement of elements of design for any given visual work. So, for example, color, you can see today you can see transparency also getting integrated into the product. Earlier days people were not very particular, people were even scared to look at what are the parts inside a product. But today it has completely got changed. People started putting transparent covers on top of mouse, transparent cover on top of computer. So, you see a transparent cover, and transparent cover on top of our bread toaster, a transparent cover on top of a watch. So, now you can see the complete mechanism. So, now this is also part of visual design. So, in the principles of visual design, you have balance, you have proportions, emphasis, juxtapositioning, rhythm, concept, function and epilogues. So, these all get integrated into the principles of design. So, what is balancing? Balancing, it is a principle of design that places element in such a way that these elements are evenly distributed. The concept of balance is fundamental to well formed design. So, here it is a principle of design that places elements in such a way that these elements are evenly distributed. It's when you try to represent something, putting all those things in a cluster form, you might miss out informations. So, that is what is evenly distributed. Let it be color, let it be placing of a texture. Many a times on a desktop, you see people trying to put all sorts of things on their desktop screen, the file folders. So, that is what is like. These are some of the elements are evenly distributed. The concept of balancing is fundamental and fundamental to well formed design. Most of the principles work opposite to each other, hence this principles basically tries to balance. So, it can be in terms of text, it can be in terms of color. So, the principles, most of the principles work opposite to each other, so that they try to get balance. There are three kinds of visual balancing. One is symmetrical balance, asymmetrical balance and radial balance. Symmetrical balance is, this one is a symmetrical balance, and asymmetrical balance is the other one, and the radial balance is also there. This is a radial balancing. Okay. So, balance can be in three categories: symmetrical, asymmetrical and radial balance. In symmetrical balance, the balance is created through a mirror image about an axis or plane or about two axes or planes, etc. So, this is symmetrical balance. For example, if you take design and if you look at a human body, it is almost axisymmetrical from the external. The internal part positioning is a different story. Let us not, it is an analogy, please do not try to bisect it and look into the words, but you see that it is symmetry, right. In the same way, if there are certain products, when you look at those products, it looks more appealing by looking at the form, its symmetry would have followed. In some places, axisymmetry is also, asymmetry is also there. When you talk about Taj Mahal, it is a symmetry project, symmetry, completely symmetry. If you make a cross section in between, you can see the mirror image. So, the form, the color, they all try to balance and try to make it visually appealing. So, a balance which is created through a mirror image about an axis or plane or about two axes or planes, etc., are the definition for symmetric balance. They are further divided into horizontal balance, vertical balance and horizontal vertical balance. You can see horizontal, you can see vertical mirror image and you can see horizontal vertical balance. The rule of third, visual center and grid must be always considered. So, you can see all these patterns which are there, and these are all towards balancing. When we look at asymmetric, the balance is created through the odd or mismatched figure of elements that are further divided into all over balance asymmetric tension. So, this is, you try to take a sunflower, the balance which is created through the odd or mismatched figure of the element, that can also be part of balancing. So, all over balance, it is all over balance and it can also be axisymmetric tension. The radial balance is a balance which is created through the balance axis point, visual center, balance center. So, you can try to create a coiled spring, this is called as a torsional spring. So, you can have it and you can have this figure also. So, it can be further divided into same shape and different shapes. This is same shape getting into and these are different shapes getting into. These are radial balances. What is balance? It is a design that places elements in such a way that these elements are evenly distributed. The concept of balance is fundamental to a well formed design. So, balance can be of three types, which is symmetry, axisymmetry and radial symmetry. You can see all these three in the nature. So, balance, further examples, these are some of the examples which are there, and this is people have used it, visual communication, balancing examples, this is a forklift where in which they have used it, this is a gym, cycling. So, this here also they have used it. So, here people have demonstrated various balancing examples. Another one is proportion or ratios. Ratios are very important. If you look at a human body, there is a ratio between the, if you divide it into three parts, leg part, the body part and the head part, there is a ratio. And if somebody is very appealing, the ratios in his body is all the features in his body has some fixed ratios. So, then the personality looks to be appealing. So, there is a proportion and a ratio for any given object. A product designer should consider this also in his product as far as visual design is concerned. It defines the relative size and ratio of various elements used in design and hence the relative size of the object in the product. So, if you have a toy, so the face of the toy and the body of the toy has to be in some ratios. If you want to make a comical figure, that is a different thing, but if you want to make it a standard one with all applications, it is almost there. For example, you might have a big object or a big machine. The button which is used has to be in some ratios. The color which is used in the machine has to be in certain color. For example, if you have an emergency switch, always it is red in color. If you go back and look into the colors and if you go back and look into the appeal, so you can always see red color will be given for stop and the button size will be different, and this button, in order to show the prominency of this red, this will always be attached to a yellow background. So, the contrast is clearly seen. So, the button shape, the machine, all these things has some proportions. If it is completely disproportionate, it will not be visually appealing. Okay. So, here what we talk is any feature you take in a product, any part you take in a product, all these things will follow some ratio. It can be 1:1, it can be 1:0.5, it can be 1:0.33 or 1:3.33, any ratios, but it has to follow some ratios. Otherwise, the product will not have, first of all, engineering stability, and second thing, it will not be appealing. Where a ratio defines the overall size with respect to the surrounding. The relative size of things can be adjusted for the purpose of creating a perspective illusion. Perspective illusion, exaggerating comparative apparent attributes as a message or metamorph, or simply to achieve a balanced layout in terms of distribution of mass and space. We always try to follow this ratio. Look at it here, a big fish, a small man. So, it is so that you might be in a closer vicinity. The man who is there in the boat, if he is drawn very small, it gives you a feel as though he is very far off. So, these are illusions, exaggerations, whatever it is, can be done. So, proportional ratios are one another important thing in design, visual design. So, maintaining proportion is always an important thing. Surrounding factor is also very important. Surrounding factor, let it be a home or a public place, it looks at the surrounding factor, and for example, here an artist is standing there, she is wearing a dress which is in contrast with the background, with the surrounding. So, she is there, and you can see her face, her height is in proportion to that of the or it is in some proportion or ratio with respect to the background statue or a monument which is there. So, the overall proportion may ruin the balance, ruin the basic configuration, the overcrowded flower on a gown. Okay. So, over proportion may ruin the basic configuration also. Very standard human body. So, as the proportion can be taken by taking this as a reference. So, here what we are trying to say is this flower bouquets, whatever is gown on the flowers on the gown, they are all distributed so clusteredly, so that it has not made it more appealing. So, use of golden ratio and the rule of third is very important. Using some visual tension in the product makes it more appealing. So, as a study material, I will try to give you more about golden ratio and rule of third, so that you can understand. It is explaining these two ratios in this course. So, using of fractal and product similarity concepts are also part of the proportion. So, I will try to give you a study material for golden ratio, rule of third and fractal design. So, proportions you can see here. So, here we have talked about golden ratio. Golden ratio is a standard ratio that has initiated from the old Greek time, and actually a thumb of rule for aesthetics. So, if you look at it, this is A, B. So, this is a golden ratio is used to create a spiral which can be seen through the natural world. So, if you look at shell, it will follow this ratio. So, this is again the ratio golden ratio which has been followed. So, here also you can see at different dimensions the golden ratios have been followed. Some more examples of golden ratio. So, it is a Fibonacci spiral is duplicated, rotated around the center, and the circular pattern is mirrored. When assembled, the result forms a pattern of a sunflower. Okay. So, this one Fibonacci spiral. This is another Fibonacci spiral with both rotating in the different directions. They join together, and if you rotate these two discs one ahead of each other, so you will get a pattern formed in legs, and this forms a sunflower pattern. In proportion, the self similarity, meaning the building units contained in the pattern is the same as the overall complete shape. Self similarity pattern. So, you see here these two patterns are self similar because the shape of the units are the shape as the shape of the whole. So, these two. Okay. So, you can see these two rectangles. These two patterns are self similar. Shape is same, the color is a rectangle, here also rectangle, and then we are doing it. So, all these patterns are self similar. So, they have something. So, when you talk about this fractal, so fractal is a shape that is self similar and has a fractional dimensions. So, this is what it is. So, you can, this is a basic pattern, you can form at every edge a same star which is there, and this can be further accumulated and at every edge it can be formed, and you can have varying colors and then you do it. Coach snowflake is another simple fractal design using two equilateral triangles to create a star. This is a equilateral triangle to create a star. In the first iteration, when each iteration is reduced by 2/3, so fractal design is 2/3, it then fits into the previous shape and creates a new iteration. So, here and here it is 2/3 of it is there. A fractal can be used to create an infinite variety of shapes. This is how it is formed in a tree. This simple fractal becomes a tree within a few iterations. The fractal can be used to visually reproduce almost anything found in nature. So, in nature it always follows fractal design. So, here the concept of self similarity is there in proportions. So, you can see machines which are getting developed follows this proportion. So, this is length 1 and this is phi, which we studied in last class 5, in last lecture 5. So, AB, they follow this AB by BC equal to BC by AC. So, it is 1 by phi, this is, so I have just written it like this. So, it is 1 unit and this is phi. Okay. So, now I express it mathematically, AB by BC is equal to BC by AC. So, it is nothing but 1 by phi is equal to phi. So, BC is phi plus 1. So, now when I try to solve it, the phi takes a value of 1.61803. This is the phi's value, and we always try to follow this in the design, in the forms we try to do it. So, if you try to take in this figure also, you have A which is divided into B and C, then we have D and E, they also follow the ratio. DE is to EB, DE is to EB, BC is to CA, all follows this 1 is to 1.618. So, all these figures, if you look at it, will be in some proportion, and this phi 1.618 number ratio is very appealing. So, people try to make the product proportions in this ratio. The other one is direction, emphasis and contrast. So, here the course or a path a viewer's eyes will take through a composition is shaped by actual or implied lines and actual or implied geometric shapes. So, we always try to take a view like this. We will never say, for example, our direction will be something like this. We will never try to take a direction different from that. So, a course or a path of a viewer's eye. So, it is also good when you try to give a visual design, you try to take the informations in a direction, so that and then all those fonts are available on the panel itself. So, direction, emphasis, contrast. So, the course or a path of viewer's eye will take through the composition, it is shaped by actual or implied lines, and actual or implied lines or geometrical shapes. There are certain points, lines, curves, areas and volumes which need utmost attention from the customer, and hence must be made different or a distinct color. When you look at a map, when you say that you look at a map and this is a map of some of your institute or something, and you always try to give a dot and make a red color thing on say and say you are here. So, here what happens is, after doing all these things, you are first supposed to understand where are you, and then you will always try to take a reference to another place from this place. How do you go about? So, this tries to help you in giving directions, this tries to give you an emphasis, and this also tries to give you a contrast. So, there are certain points, lines, curves, areas and volumes which need utmost attention from the customer and hence be made very distinct from others. A point or an area in a product need to be different or separate from the other, which can be done by contrast of size, shape or color. So, this is what I was trying to say. Emphasis, also called focus in some schema, is the act of causing some regions of an image to seem more important than the other, creating a balanced series of emphasis. So, for example, in this entire background this is given importance, in this entire background this is given importance. Okay. So, that is what we are trying to give here. So, emphasis is that. So, in the same way, if you look at it in this entire figure, you try to give a color, black color is important. So, in this entire figure, the size of this pen which is used for writing it on a digital tab is very important. So, these are emphasis given. So, emphasis, also called as focus in some schema, is the act of causing some region of an image to seem more important than other. So, you try to give more importance to those points. In the same way, in a figure also, if you try to think of a product wherein which you have a panel, in that panel if you want to make certain prominent points, see, a corner cannot be a prominent point. At the center, somewhere at the focus, you create a prominent point, so that it gives more emphasis to those information or this part. Contrast is something. Viewer's eye to contrast is to set all elements in a definite opposition in order to highlight different attributes. So, opposite, dark background, white background, okay. So, you can say white, dark background. So, here these are the viewers. The contrast is another thing which is very important. If the contrast is not made properly, maybe you can also think of contrast with respect to packaging. Okay, color with respect to packaging. So, viewer's eye to contrast is all set or is to set elements in defined opposition in order to highlight different attributes. So, juxtapositioning or proximity, I said in the last time itself, reproducing the same unit cell pattern is nothing but juxtapositioning. So, producibility, it reflects the ease in which a product can be made, which is a measure of how easily a product can be manufactured to the engineering design within a premium quality and low investment in the order to maximize profit. So, that is producibility. So, here what are we trying to talk about? We are trying to talk about these are the different patterns. So, for this it contains the flavor of one of the early contribution during the development of a product design process itself, which includes the following guidelines: reduction in the number or type of parts and features, selection of components. So, this part we will study more when we study design for manufacturing little later. So, here we studied reduction in the number and type of parts, selection of components having preferred size, weight and material, and then we ensure testability and repairability by using pre-built test methods, modularity, test points and etc. The testing on the basis of development to assure importance in quality and performance during the environmental thing. So, these are some of the guidelines which we use, and we will study in detail when we study design for manufacturing. So, repetition. So, in juxtapositioning we have repetition, a variation. Repetition means the same unit cell getting repeated n number of times. Variation is it is repeated, but you have a variation in your unit cell. So, pattern are regularly assemblage of repeated and other varied elements. So, you can see here at a regular varied elements, same thing. Pattern, these are all patterns. Discord uses large contrasting intervals between elements to maximize tension and heightened the recognition. Okay. So, here you can see very clearly even the juxtaposition or proximity, you will try to have variations. So, one is repetition, one is variation in the repetition. So, is a process of creating non-identical instances of an element or assemblage of element by adjusting one or more of the attributes. So, what you did, you changed this, Pattern are regular assemblage of repeat and other varied elements. Okay. So, these are the variations which you have in juxtapositioning. So, you can see that variation, whatever we studied here. What is variation? This one is pattern followed here. This is something like a braille, repetition is there, and this is pattern. Pattern is, you see, mirror image, something like that. So, pattern, you can have something like that, are regularly assemblage of repeated and or varied elements. Okay. You can also have orientation like this. Okay. And if you go back here, I said about mirror, this is what it is, and here is a switch which is prominent, wherein which it tries to have their major focus. If you start the game, stop the game, or whatever it is, start the operation, stop the operation, whatever it is. Next one is rhythm, tempo and harmony. Rhythm is the variation of the duration of sound / visual element or any other event over a time. Rhythm means when governed by rules, it is called metered. It is a harmonious composition. Even the element that stands in the opposition shares enough common attributes which they are surrounding to seem a part of the whole. So, rhythm is a variation of the duration of sound / visual element or any other over time. So, the rhythm is again something like repeat, but it is a variation you have. There is a variation between rhythm and juxtapositioning. Okay. In a harmonious composition, even the elements that stand in the opposition shares enough common attributes with their surrounding to seem to be a part of the whole. So, harmony is a design. In design is about finding a kind of visual rhyme schemes expressed through a single attribute or a set of attributes. Too much of variation and or too much contrast between the elements can ruin an image sense of harmony. So, for example, if you have too many buttons in front of you, you will lose the prominency of which button and what is to be done. So, too many variations or too many contrast between the elements. So, that means to say this is red, this is blue, this is green, this is yellow, this is some other. So, then you lose which button is for what when you start using it in a repetitive manner also. And by the way, cell phone or your cordless phone tries to have a juxtaposition example, and here also we try to follow the color, the number pattern is harmonious and it follows a rhythm in visual communication. So, this is a rhythm. Okay. Rhythm, tempo and harmonious, these are some of the examples. Shoe, it follows a tempo. So, it tries to give you an element. Unity and belonging, this is the last one. Unity defines the basic component with the help of which the whole product or item is seen as a single unit. This one is very, very important, defines the basic concept with the help of which the whole product or item is seen as a single unit. The basic concept defines basic idea, shape, basic size, color, texture, which has been the first food of thought for the product. So, this is the basic concept. Visual sense of oneness. Each element of art is arranged to contribute to the composition. Too much variation creates chaos. However, too much order creates boredom. Okay. So, that is what is the visual sense of oneness. So, what we are trying to say is you have 3-4 bricks attached. So, if all the bricks are of the same color, so it gives you a boredom, it gives you a boredomness. If all the bricks are of varying size, varying varieties, then it tries to create a chaos. Certain times we try to create a chaos intentionally to attract the customer. So, the element and the principal can be selected to support the intent function of the designed object. The purpose of the object unifies the design. So, if you try to talk about inclined lines and curves, so perspective projection, when we draw about it is we follow it. So, inclined lines and curves are used to generate a unit concept in the form of a shape of a product. So, you look at it how this is a kit, we can say it as a carpenter kit or a plumber kit. Okay. So, it is what it is, and then you look at a car which is drawn, and then this is a side view of the kit. Okay. So, inclined lines and curves are used to generate a unity concept, to the form of the shape of the product. So, unity example for form, unity example for form and color, this is connectedness, and these two are form and color, these are for curved ones. So, these are all some of the examples for unity. So, unity and then variety. Variety is defined as the variation in the product layout in one or many other, so that the boredom associated with the unity can be accommodated. So, these are all these are all numbers which can be placed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are all dimension variations, these are all shape variations, these are all color variations and arrangement. So, these are some of the things which you can try to plan and keep in the visual communication of placement of numbers or buttons or anything, or placement of a tile in a flat plane. Okay. A variety is defined as a variation in the product layout, this a layout in one or the other, so that the boredom associated with much unity can be accommodated. By varying the component of visual design, the artist creates interest and avoids monotony. So, all these things are basically visual design, visual communication. The way of accomplishing this is to establish an approach which involves theme and variation repetition, repeating the same image, but in different size, color, shape or thing. So, these are some of the variations which you can think of doing it. In fact, if you look at it, I just wanted you guys to appreciate, look at A, B, C, D which is there in your keyboard. It is A, S, D, F, G, right. It is never A, B, C, D, because they say the frequency of using the letter and the load which your arm can take, the frequency, so that they can start using it. So, this will give you more easy way of from the terms of operation. But when you look at the cell phone, so here A, B, C is continuous, C, D, D, E, F, G, H, I, these are all continuous, but whereas in a keyboard it is non-continuous. So, here is a variety, depending upon your requirements you choose which one, and this will play an important role as far as the product success when it comes to the market. So, functions suggest no art for art's sake. So, anything you do has to have a functional sake in it. In the real life, the world problem, things have to work. Design should deserve the purpose. Okay. No matter how beautiful it is, but if it is not functional efficiently, that design will be discarded. So, there is a proportion between this and your button size. So, this got translated into this proportion, okay. And then this is a proportion which we try to do, assuming that there is a lady, she has a height, stretches it, and then on top of it you have something else. So, this is not acceptable. So, it can be an elegant modular design, but this is not successful, because from the functional point of view it has lot of problems. So, just by artistic you can't solve or you can't sell a product. A mixture of these both can try to make a successful product, visual as well as functional. That is what I said. Functional suggests no art for art's sake. So, you try to integrate art, but it has to also do its function. So, today's task for students are, try to take a keyboard, okay. It has all sorts of keys. So, you have to first understand and tell me why there is a variation in the size of button, Second thing is, why are different locations assigned for different letters or characters. For example, here you have all the numbers given 1, 2, 3. Why not it be continuously done here? Okay. Or you have all the function keys given here, F1, F2, F3, F4. Why don't all the function keys come here? Why is the enter button size very large? Why is that you have a big space bar? Okay. And then why is the letter not uniform? Why is the letter not continuous? Letter means I am talking about the character, alphabet, not continuous in a keyboard. And variation in the size, and how did they decide the size? How did the size for button decided? How is the size for button decided? Okay, these are some other questions you have, right? And I have one more question to ask. How do they choose the color? How do you choose the color of keyboard? Generally it is black. Today I see many more things coming up. Generally it is black. I see nowadays white keyboard coming. I see a flexible keyboard coming. So, all these things, see, if you look at it, all these things play a very important role, and here you try to look at whatever we have discussed in terms of ratios, proportions, in terms of color, in terms of juxtapositioning. All these things are very important, which has been considered. So, the phi has been considered, the ratios have been considered, the fractal design has been considered, the golden ratio has been considered. So, all these things have been considered to make the product more and more appealing. Okay. So, with this we come to an end of lecture 7. So, the next thing what we will see is how do we understand customers' voice. Thank you very much.